brief kickoff, and then I will pass it over to our host today. So again, welcome everyone. My name is Danielle Barnes. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm one of the co-founders and organizers of Austin Design Week. So glad to have you here. Thank you for those of you who have started our conversation in the chat. I recommend that you change your chat to 2 panelists and attendees and say hello. We welcome you. So if this is your first Austin Design Week event, or if it's your 5th of the week or 5th of the day, we're really glad to have you here. You'll notice that we have our ways to stay in touch and connect on social at the bottom of this first screen. So we encourage you to tweet and Instagram and Facebook the things that you've learned. You can take screenshots, hashtag ADW20, hashtag embrace, and we encourage you to fill in that blank. What are you embracing? You can move to the next slide. There's a lot happening this week. It's hard to believe that we're at the end of day 4, but we still have a full day of festivities tomorrow, starting at 8 a.m. and going till 8 p.m. So be sure to check out the schedule. The bit.ly link is there. There's also a couple of events that you can participate on your own time. So make sure that you check out what's happening. Everything is free for you to attend. I also want to give a shout out, if you haven't already joined the ADW community Slack, I encourage you to do so. There's lots of great conversations happening there. You can introduce yourself, we share updates, and then folks have also been sharing some takeaways and highlights from our events, which has been really great. And then finally, last slide, I want to say a big thank you to everyone who makes Austin Design Week happen. Our volunteers, our generous hosts, our community partners, sorry, I blanked, and especially to our sponsors here that help keep this free every year. So with that, I am really excited to introduce Yoselin, who is going to be kicking off our panel and our webinar today. And thank you all so much.
Hi, everybody. So we're going to start off with an icebreaker while we're waiting for everybody to get in. So let me go ahead and set that up. So while we wait for everybody to log in, let's take this time. If you can, go to menti.com and use the code above here, 3126879, and just go ahead and enter how you identify as, whether it's your ethnicity, your culture, your gender identity, or anything else. Go ahead. Oh, that was fast. So for today's panel, it's called Embrace Your Colors, Code Switching While Working Remote During a Pandemic. We thought it was important to have these type of discussions in order to create that space for people of color and people of different intersecting identities. I know from my past experience, even participating and moderating on these panels, they haven't always been as diverse. So this year, the Personas Collective really tried hard to find a diverse cast of people who come from different backgrounds and within the creative industry that can share their experiences. I'm really enjoying this word bubble. There you go. If you guys can, keep on adding to it. So far we have 34 people in. So while that's going, I'll go ahead and introduce what we're doing today. So while we have the icebreaker going, let's take this time to just acknowledge the land that we're on. We would, as the Personas Collective, we would like to start this panel by doing a land acknowledgement to recognize and respect the Tonkawa, Comanches, and Lepanapachis people who were the most common in this area around the time of Austin's founding. The Personas Collective, we like to focus on hosting events or talks that empower POC creatives with a passion for visibility, social equity, and prosperity of their people through collaboration and community building. And the reason why we chose code switching today, according to dictionary.com, code switching is about modifying one's behavior, appearance, and etc. to adapt to the different social cultural norms. And that's what we're here doing today. So let's go ahead and dive into our discussion. Thanks for everybody participating within our board panel. There you go. So I'm going to be introducing everybody briefly, but first off, I'm Zulu Zulahan. I'm an illustrated designer, activist, and if you're familiar with my work, I do a lot of work within immigration, and I do a lot of cultural talks, which is why we're here today. So starting off, I'm going to introduce our panelist, Alice J. Lee. She is a first-generation Korean American graphic designer, researcher, and educator. She received her BA from Yale University and her Master of Design and Graphic Design from the University of Illinois at Chicago. She currently serves as a graduate co-advisor of MFA Communication Design at Texas State University. So if we can, go ahead, Alice. I think we'd like to hear a little more about you from you.
Oh, wow. I thought you were going to do the bio.
Oh, no. I think it's more authentic hearing from you.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I just want to say thank you for Personas Collective for inviting me here and for facilitating, I think, what's going to be a really meaningful and for me, educational conversation. And I want to thank so much the panelists that are here with me and Austin Design Week. I am Korean American. I was born here, so if I go by the U.S. government's, I guess, categorization of first generation, second generation, I am second generation. But as an American, I am a first generation, and so just I guess a little clarity there. And yeah, I am new to Texas relatively. This is my third year here in Texas. I am from Illinois and Chicago, and as an educator, I hope I can provide, as a working designer and educator, I hope I can provide perhaps a perspective that can add to the conversation that we'll have today.
Thank you, Alex. Our next panelist, it's Sky Zulahan. So go ahead and correct me if I mispronounce it. I'm so used to saying Miss Zuzu. But Sky is an Afro-Latina with 5 years of experience in the tech industry. For the past 3 years, she's been working as an associate strategist in the social media space. So Sky, would you like to share more about you?
Yes, I'd be honored. Thank you so much to you and to Personas Collective, as well as Austin Design Week for hosting this and allowing us to speak. It's Sky Zulin, but yes, you you refer to me as Zuzu. Super excited to be here. My pronouns are she, her, and I work in the social media tech space, helping brands on social. I'm, lucky to celebrate an intersectionality between being not only a Black woman, but also being a Black Hispanic person, so an Afro-Latina. And so much like Alice, I am first generation. My mom's from Spain, my dad's from the Dominican Republic. So, being here in the States, myself and my siblings are the first to kind of forge any continued legacy here in the United States. But definitely love that we're having open conversations like this, especially when it's so relevant and absolutely needed. So really excited to chat with everyone and get their perspective and experience.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and introduce our next panelist, unless you would like to introduce your hair before we go.
Yes, hello. Her name is Lisa. She's new to the gang. She's got a lot of personality, a lot of body. She's been working out. But yes, this is her first appearance. So
thank you for the introduction. All right, our next panelist is Vic Rodriguez-Tang. Vic is a Peruvian queer creative human working full-time as an art director for a software company in Austin. Vic, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having us tonight, and thank you for Austin Design Week for hosting this, and everyone for joining. Sky and I actually work together. We work for the same company, sometimes in the same projects. But yeah, I'm originally from Peru. I moved to the States with my family when I was 15. I finished high school here, went to college here, and went through all that fun immigration process. And now I'm working full time in Austin. I grew up in the Dallas area, and I've only been in Austin for about 4 years. So anyone from Dallas, shout out. So yeah, most of my work daily includes with brand management, making sure that our brand meets the standards that we want, but also I work on side projects with Jocelyn on things that we're passionate about, such as intersectionality, making sure we bring like race awareness, gender identity awareness, and all that stuff. So you know, it's a lot of work, but we do it because we love it. And yeah, I'm happy to share more about my experience in the industry.
Thank you so much, Vic. And our last panelist, actually my business partner, Nsika Udo. He is a digital strategist who was born and raised in Nigeria until he moved to Maryland in 2007. He came here, he studied business, he was going to go into pharmacy, and then somehow he became a web developer. So go ahead, share more about you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Yoselin, and thank you for everyone for being here and making this happen. Like briefly, Yoselin mentioned, I am an immigrant from Nigeria. Came here very young, about 13. Grew up in Maryland and with my parents. And in Austin, I've been in Austin for the last 2 years now. And my background actually stems from healthcare into customer service, into web development. And now I'm able to bring all those different diverse background to be one of the managing partners of Spark Nerds, where we help non-profit political candidates and small businesses with their online presence as well.
Thank you. So as you can see, we definitely brought you a diverse, cast of panelists, and I hope you guys enjoyed today's talk. Let's talk about culture, let's talk about identity, let's talk about our personal experiences in the workplace, because we do not often have that safe space to even have these discussions. So thank you, Austin Design Week, for hosting us and letting us have these type of deep talks with everybody. So let's dive into the panel. All right, so for our first question, very curious, can you guys tell us, your first experience where you realized in the past where, you started seeing how you start code switching within the workspace versus your personal life?
I can go first, I guess. Yeah, so as you mentioned, like code switching, it involves a lot of things. So beyond the fact that people of color will change their speech, it also has to do with expressions, appearances, behaviors. So on the one hand, some people do it just as, subconsciously, like different groups of people that they're hanging out with. The way that you speak to your friends is not necessarily how you would speak to your parents, for example. But on the other hand, and a lot of times it's used as a method of survival. So when we're looking at people in the workforce, they're having to code switch how they are to ensure promotions and to ensure that their career continues to grow. And so the way I'm speaking now, for example, might be denoted as me speaking white, which is incorrect. It's just me enunciating my words. But people feel that they have to shift in order to do well. And so I think growing up, and especially starting off my career, I was very careful to make sure that any mannerisms that I have from my Hispanic side or my Black side, I grew up around a lot of Black people, making sure that those weren't readily apparent in case it could be used against me. And so it kind of became like second nature, where I trained myself not to do those things. And I imagine people with accents and such, like they're having to kind of change the way they speak in order to be taken seriously.
I definitely agree with, if I could jump in, if that's okay, just backing up with what Sky mentioned. Yes, definitely having to, at first I did not realize that it's actually called code switching. But after having to deal with the issue of either changing my accent at first to fit in, that's when I did realize, okay, this is actually not how I am. This is usually not how I would speak. But my first encounter with that was definitely working in a customer service environment as a team lead, because that could make it or break how people interact with you. So it can be how you sound, or how you dressed, or how you approach someone individually. And that's still something that's still going on now, even working in the political space or in the, like, let's say nonprofit space as well. And just on understanding how to navigate that question, to navigate that conversation to still get your point across.
Yeah, if I can jump in. Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit because my experience is very similar, but at the same, a little different. The first time I realized I was code switching was when I got a job at a place in Dallas. I'm not gonna name it because it's irrelevant, but where I was pretty much asked to change my whole wardrobe after I got the job. So I had already been through the interview process. They already seen my work. They already like know who I was, but they were like, well, you can't wear this, this, and that. And if you want to like fit in, then we expect you to wear like this, and that. So I literally had to like go to Old Navy and the Gap and like buy a whole new wardrobe just so I can have this job because it was so important to them to look a certain way within the building. So that's the first time I realized that if there's a place where I don't fit in for who I am, then that's not the place for me. And I'm very lucky to work for a company now where I feel that I'm accepted and embraced, all the way from like my peers to my manager, all the way to our CMO and our CEO. So I'm very happy to be in the company that I'm in, but I definitely feel like I had to code switch often, like drop my voice and make it like more low to sound more manly or whatever. But yeah, it's definitely a thing that is real. So and it manifests in different ways.
If I can add to that, so just to kind of, I don't know, just to give a little context, I think I'm older than everyone else on this panel. So, but like one of my first design jobs, it was at a small design firm and it was all men and it was me. And I was the only person of color and I was the only female. And just the sort of like culture of humor was something that definitely felt like a barrier for me right away. And the way that I was kind of spoken to about it was about fitting in, right? And being a good fit with the culture. And, thinking about it, in retrospect, I realized how that was used as kind of a way to isolate me and to perhaps, sort of control how, they were allocating resources and things like that. And so that's definitely something I do remember. And then after that job, I took a job as a designer in a corporate setting, and it was the reverse, where I was with a bunch of females, and it was very much more about, yes, the dress code, what I was wearing, and I was, again, the only person of color. And even just sort of the slang that was used, and again, fitting in, and having to change who I was in order to get along with or to make others feel comfortable by my presence.
That's exactly right. So code switching is done predominantly to make others feel comfortable, which is unfortunate, especially as we're looking at, like, we think of the concept of code switching, right? It applies to everyone. Anybody can code switch. But when you're talking to people of color or like marginalized groups such as women, having to shift to ensure that others feel okay and that whatever we do that they can't quite understand, we push it down, or we set it aside to ensure that we are assimilating and becoming a part of this group, so that we fit in and that we can move forward, or that we have a group. It's like elementary, as far as like, oh, I need to do this in order to have friends, and so I'm going to do these things so that these people will like me. It's similar to that sort of thing.
No, thank you guys for sharing. Obviously, you guys share different experiences. I know for me, I was born in Mexico, raised on the border. And when I left towards the city, I never knew how thick my accent was. And I don't think any of you guys know, but when I moved, I had to practice with a cork so I can like enunciate words properly. So now these days, I just kind of shamelessly say, like, excuse me, I'm having a brown moment, because there's so many things I can't pronounce. And you guys are probably gonna run into that today during this panel. But running off of that question, our next question is, during the pandemic, we're all working online, we're working remote, body language is different, we're face to face, we can't really hide unless, we just take off our screen and roll our eyes. But have you guys still found yourself code switching while working remote or social distancing with your peers?
Yes, I think even more so now, because you don't have that one-on-one interaction with people. And for example, if you're calling in with like a cell phone, there's the difference that that first impression is no longer done in person. It's through your voice, and that opens up even more room for you to be judged, especially if you're not absolutely confident about what you're talking about. But I think now definitely it's a lot more fearful to either be correct or to fit in, or to always say the right things, you know.
Yeah, so now that we're all virtual, it's much harder to kind of read body language, mind you. Like I can only see, you know, a third or quarter of the person. And so a lot of times too, when we're in meetings, people have their camera shut off. And so I'm just hearing your voice. And so it's hard to kind of see if there's like anger or annoyance or happiness. Like you kind of just only focus on someone's tone and inflection. So there's something to be said, like me talking to you right now, you don't know how I'm sitting, if I'm tense or not. It looks like you know, the way that I'm speaking, it seems like I'm relaxed, but you know, I might be super like uptight and nervous, or it's not clear. And so when you're in person, the body language situation is much different. And yeah, it's different. It's better, you know, if we get to see each other and such, but like not the same as being in person at all.
I've been thinking about this a lot, you know, even before, you know, being invited to this panel, because it's like we're in our homes now. And so like you were saying, Jocelyn, it's like there's a lot we can't, like there's not a lot of separation, right? And so it's like being in a Zoom call, like if you're not using a virtual background, it's like they're seeing so much like you. And like I've started in some ways, I feel like that's been liberating in some ways. And like, you know, me, because I teach, like meeting with my students, I've actually really enjoyed, you know, seeing my students' pets and, you know, sort of getting to know that side of them and stuff like that. But like in certain meetings, I'm realizing I'm having to completely change everything, change my background, change like all this stuff because because of who it is that I'm meeting with. And it's something that, yeah, it's harder. I don't know. It's a new set of challenges, I think.
Yeah, I agree 100% because like Alice was saying, you're your home, your own space, like your sanctuary. So, but now it's your place of work at the same time. So I have done the same thing, like that Alice, like move things from the background, change a different background for my virtual background, things like that, just to be more professional or to come across more professional at least. But I feel like the lines are so blurred because when the Zoom meeting ends, I'm still at my house, so it's hard to like okay, can I change this now? Like it's you know, is my background okay? Is my t-shirt okay? Whatever. So I feel like it's a different set of challenges. I don't think code switching in person or code switching we're working remotely are different things, but they definitely have like their own set of challenges that now we're starting to see more as we're in the middle of a pandemic.
Thank you. And just to build off of that, out of curiosity, how has the relationship with your colleagues been? Because I've noticed, or I've heard many stories from everybody where it's like, oh, I can't stand these people. And, or it's like, oh, you know what? I'm actually like developing these close relationships with, you know, these people of color, especially because we just tend to gravitate towards each other, especially when we see each other in person. It's like, okay, I know you're going to talk to me because nobody else is. So how is that working out online, whether it's your colleagues, your students, like how are those relationships building, and do you still find yourself switching between them?
I think it allows people to take more of a risk socially, if you will, like the idea of like reaching out to someone and saying, hey, because there's less of that social backlash if you were to walk up to someone and, you know, them be like, what are you doing talking to me? So there's more open communication, at least for me. I know specifically too, when, you know, the protests started gaining traction back in June, I found that a lot of my coworkers were reaching out to me and having more honest conversations where they could take the time to be more thoughtful about what they were talking about. So I've seen it be a good thing where I am getting closer to people that I normally probably wouldn't have been able to talk to, just circumstantially going to work, getting stuff done, leaving, and not having a chance to interact.
Yeah, I feel like working remote, like at least for me with my immediate team, we have built a closer bond. Like we always check in the morning with everyone, like good morning, and then before we go offline at the end of the day or when we go to lunch. And I feel like because we're almost forced to be face to face when we're in meetings unless you have your camera off. Like we've been able to get to know each other a little bit better and to interact a little bit more, where sometimes when we were sitting like next to each other or across from each other, sometimes we didn't interact at all because we were too busy working or we just didn't have the time. But I think the beauty of Zoom is that at least for in some occasions, you can turn off your camera and you don't have to be on all the time. Like maybe you have kids and they're running in the background, or maybe you have a dog that is barking. So I think people also seeing that human size of other people creates a sense of empathy. And I think that's where, some relations can become a little bit closer.
Yeah, I think I've absolutely I've had to learn, especially being like typically for me when I'm in a typical like office space, I like to go straight into business. If we're talking about business, but now it's not like that anymore. For example, if we're meeting in in the past, when we go to like meet clients, we would either meet in in an open space where you can kind of get the body language, the conversation flows a lot better, and you can go straight into business because that is why you're there. But now on Zoom calls, I've found it that like Vic mentioned, getting to know people a little bit more. Asking the right questions. It's not always just let's go straight to let's go straight to business. But now I think all of us, we especially during this time, we do have some level of inconvenience that is going on, and having that time to be able to either share personal stories or seeing how other people are doing. I think that usually makes the situation less tense and makes it easier for you to be able to communicate and actually get to know that person as well.
I won't lie though, I will say really quickly, Alice, that the days I don't have my camera on, there's a lot of eye rolling, a lot of sighs, a lot of just like, are you kidding me kind of moments, but I get to say that because I'm on mute and my camera's off.
Yeah, so for me, most of my Zoom, so I'm teaching fully online, and, so it's been definitely a learning curve in terms of how to facilitate learning, a studio class learning online. And some things that I found is that it's when there's maybe more than 6 people or 5 people even in a Zoom meeting, it's like everyone just gets really quiet. They're kind of timid they're afraid to start talking or to even, and because they're afraid that they're going to cut someone off or like interrupt. And so what I found to be relatively successful is group my students into smaller groups of 3. And so that seems to open people up and kind of give people maybe just the ability to share more and talk more, and everyone is unmuted and we can just talk freely. And I find that, so to me it seems like the how many people in a room kind of impacts that dynamic a little bit. And the other thing that I guess I kind of miss, like in terms of I feel like what Zoom is, it's almost as if Zoom is business, kind of like what some of you were saying. And so it's like when I do want to kind of just have a, hey, how are you doing conversation with a coworker, it's like we all call each other instead. It's like what seems to be happening. And I think that's partly maybe just Zoom fatigue and work meetings happen in Zoom. And so if we do want to connect with each other, it's like we're looking for other ways of doing that maybe.
So somebody had a question and they were wondering, what are the stress relievers that you use to help remove that Zoom apathy or that anxiety?
Like Sky was saying, like I turn off my camera. Like if I don't need to be presenting or speaking, and let's say if it's a big meeting, like 20 plus people, 10 plus people, if I don't need to be on camera, like I'm not. And you know, if I need to say something, I'll mute, but I won't show my video. And I feel like that takes a lot of the stress away from like having to be on all the time. Like, oh, I gotta make sure like, you know, I look presentable and like my background, it's fine, or like that my kids are not running around, you know, trying to like hurt each other or whatever. So I feel like having the like that opportunity and that benefit of like being able to do that releases a lot of stress, because you don't have to like be the person that they expect you to be 24/7, but you can pick your battles and choose when it's like, okay, like I think I can be on camera, or maybe I had a bad day and I don't want to be on camera. So I think that's, you know, if you have the power to like turn off your camera and turn off your sound, then do it. Like it's only going to help you mentally. I know some companies have different policies, but I think more people are starting to understand that Zoom fatigue is real, and it's starting to happen more and more as we keep working remote.
With that Zoom fatigue, do you guys ever feel, you know, the pressure to have to prove yourself to your peers, especially right now that we're working remote, like having that anxiety of having to like work harder and faster?
For sure. It seems as if like I never leave this desk. And it's, yeah, I don't know. It seems as if at first, maybe with the pandemic and being at home, there was sort of like a gaining of time, like so you weren't commuting, and so you got some time. But then I think that quickly shifted into just working more, and in a way, I think that has just kind of continued to, you know, escalate.
And I think Vic brought up a very good point of being able to just turn off your video call. But if you're in a situation that that you cannot necessarily turn it off, I think what have worked out for me is being actually preparing for the meeting, either if it's whether it's like 30 minutes beforehand, or just kind of like having an understanding as to what the different possible ways the meeting can definitely go, so that way you are not thrown off guard, or you know something comes up that you had missed. So definitely just being a little bit more prepared for the meeting, going over the meeting materials and possibly like how long it would take, because then at that point you would notice that your meeting would run a lot more efficiently as well.
And yeah, and then piggybacking off of that, like I made a joke about, you know, the idea of being able to say what you really think when you're not on camera, and having your microphone muted. But there is something to be said about the fact that when you're in person, you can't necessarily, you have to like keep yourself together basically, and remain composed. Like when you're in your space and you're able to kind of turn your camera off, or mute yourself, you give yourself a second to just be yourself without having to turn on, like Vic mentioned. There's very much like the code switching of, it might be a little different because we're virtual, but having to present yourself is what code switching is all about. And so being able to just kind of, you know, be yourself without that added pressure is something that I do. And my company and my team specifically, they're very good about letting us know that we can opt out of sharing our video. We don't always have to share it. We're allowed to just kind of be in our own space. Otherwise, like I do find myself like setting time aside just to get ready for specific meetings. You know, I'll pull Lisa out and be like, okay, I got to get her ready. And then, you know, got to look presentable, put a little color on my cheeks. But otherwise, it's just like, if I want to just throw my hair up and just like breathe and kind of figure things out, like that's what turning your camera off is about. And so, you know, for those who feel like they can't, talking to your manager and saying like, would it be okay if like for the days I'm not feeling 100% to just kind of speak instead of being seen, that has helped my mental health exponentially.
Okay, we have a good question from the audience. So what is an example of when you didn't code switch and instead you chose to show up as your full self or part of yourself and that wanted to share it? Sorry, excuse me. Brown moment again. So when's an example when you didn't code switch and instead you just chose to be more authentic at work, basically, and show more of who you are? There we go.
For me, if I may, for me, started when I started looking for full-time jobs about almost 2 years ago, because before that I was freelancing for about 2-3 years because I was in grad school. I'm still in grad school. And then I was like doing different things. I had a complicated schedule. So I felt like in order to get more clients, I constantly found myself code switching or presenting myself in different ways just so I can get the contract or whatever. But once I started looking for a job, a full-time job, I was like, okay, if I cannot be myself at this place, this job is not for me. And at that point, I made the decision of like, okay, if they ask me to change my wardrobe, if they think like my hair is to this or to that, or I have to cover my tattoos, then I'm like, that place it's not for me. And once I let go of like the pressure of having to find a place that will pay me well and also will let me be myself, once I embraced that, I felt like I had more power to make more decisions in my life that will benefit my mental health and benefit myself in general. So I think at the moment you show up authentically at your place of work, at your school or whatever, it's just such a relief that you cannot explain. It's just like when it happens, you know that it feels right and it will make you a better person, a better designer, a better educator. And then that translates into your work. Like some of my work includes managing our brand. And one thing that I have implemented is some of our illustrations. I want to see more people of color, people of different body sizes into some of the work that we put out. So I feel like by showing myself authentically to work, that translates into some of the work I do. And then I'm very lucky that I'm in the company that I'm in. But if things weren't the way they are where I'm at, I probably wouldn't be there because it's not a place for me. So I know right now with the pandemic, it's probably tough finding the right job, but they are out there. So if you're at a place that you don't like, just keep looking because it's going to be so much better for your mental health in general if you're at a place where you can be your authentic self.
Yeah, and I had a similar experience when I came to Austin two years ago and started going to a lot of either technology or creative events, and it was very quick. I was very quick to realize that this space is not necessarily meant for people like that look like me. It's meant to accommodate people that look like me. And once I was able to grasp that concept, I was able to understand that what I actually bring into those spaces are very, very unique. And being able to kind of going back to what Vic said and being able to hold on to that is what is unique about you. If you're not in that space, you bring something of value into any space that you walk into, and if that value is not being appreciated for your own mental sanity, it's always best to just walk out, because from my personal experience and from friends and stories I've heard, it does not get better over time. It just gets worse. So once you feel that that's just not where you belong. I understand that sometimes you might just have to, get the job for either bills and things like that. But as just having that mindset or having it in your mind that you're just not here, you're only here for right now, would definitely get you to where you would feel a lot more comfortable and a lot more appreciated as well.
Anybody else want to jump in and answer that question?
I struggle with this a lot, and something that maybe Zoom has made a little bit more apparent to me, and I'm sure other factors too, is I wonder, like, it's weird meeting people for the first time via Zoom, because it's just a weird thing, right? And so, I've met people for, I've only seen them through Zoom, and vice versa. They've only seen me through Zoom. And I've started to wonder, and this is something I haven't thought about in a while, but like, I think I do kind of surprise people that I don't speak with an accent and that I'm not super timid. And that does, like, I don't know, it is interesting. It makes me think about potential repercussions of that, and how people perceive me, and you know, and what may happen. But I'm very encouraged by what Vic and Nasika have shared. And yeah, I think in the long term, you know, we have to be who we are, and hopefully we can continue making that a safer endeavor for everybody.
So with everything going on right now with the pandemic, do you think there's been, more of an understanding built within code switching or cultural awareness, or just learning how to interact with your peers and colleagues? Or, even from your perspective, maybe your white counterparts, like, have they built more of an awareness when, speaking to you about events going on? Like Sky mentioned earlier, there was the BLM movement that happened this summer, and we just have been having a lot of sensitive subjects being brought up lately.
I mean, I feel like those conversations have continued to happen, and I feel like there is more of an open conversation about it. Not necessarily sure if it's changed anything. I feel like with the Black Lives Matter movement, it was just like all the rage, like everything was revolving around that, and people were so excited to kind of just like, move toward progress. But as time went on, we noticed that it kind of started to be less relevant, and there was less media coverage or conversations about it. And so, I mean, I hope that like people are still talking about it, understanding that there are a plethora of resources available for them to know what others are going through. I think the biggest thing to note is that people of color, especially Black people, are not a monolith. We don't owe you a conversation. We don't need to educate you on what's going on. There are resources out there, but a lot of people are willing to have a conversation if you truly are willing to learn. So, I mean, I know that this is not change that will happen overnight, but definitely the closest people to me, I feel, have taken a step back and like really tried to educate themselves, and our conversations are much more thoughtful, and I haven't really seen anything go backward, but I imagine that like as we continue on, there's still very much a lot of work to do. And so for those who are joining who are not people of color, like be a part of those conversations, be allies to your friends of color, and speak up where necessary. Make sure you're keeping your leadership teams accountable, and ensuring that those promises that have been made are kept, and change is moving toward progress. So I think it's just something to always be aware of and have top of mind. It's not necessarily like we need to, be fighting the fight every second of their day, but just also being aware and being able to help support and implement that change.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I want to talk about like what Sky was saying too, like not about, she was saying like Black people, they don't owe you an explanation. I think it's very similar situation with queer people and trans people. Like they don't owe you an explanation. They don't have to tell you like, what's between their legs, like if that matters. But a lot of times those type of conversations can be very taxing and exhausting. And sometimes we don't have the mental capacity to, stand by the refrigerator, at work and like explain someone like why they use the wrong pronoun, or why they shouldn't say this, or why that was, insensitive. So I think, people have Google at their fingertips. So I think if anything, find ways that where you're not gonna get exhausted about talking about this stuff, like start a blog, or like maybe one thing that I did, it's like at work, like they started putting tampons and pads in the men's restroom, which is something that I never seen. But I started seeing some kind of negative reactions from from people in the bathroom, just like having, I guess, like locker room talk or whatever. And that really pissed me off. So I was like, well, I'm gonna use my voice, and instead of like confront people there and there, I was like, I'm gonna write a blog that hopefully my company will back me up, and they did, and then just posted to bring awareness about the the issues. So there are ways where you can use your voice, and that always doesn't translate to having a one-on-one conversation, because if you're having a one-on-one conversation with 10, 15, 20 people a day, at the end of the day, you're going to be completely exhausted and probably lose some of the passion that you have about that community or that cause or that movement.
Let's see, anybody else? Actually, Alice, I'm curious to hear, I'm not sure if you have any international students, like how maybe those relationships are working out and those conversations, especially with the fear. It's like, yes, we talk a lot about BML. We also have issues with immigration. We have issues about marriage equality still being legalized. And now with international students, they're having their own struggles too. So how has that been going?
Yeah, you know, the summer, I mean, you know, the pandemic has been challenging on a lot of levels. And then, you know, the federal government or the Trump administration basically rescinded or was threatening to rescind this exception that was provided during the pandemic for international students to maintain their visa while attending fully online classes. And so essentially a lot of our international, this is a lot of legal stuff, but essentially what was happening was that the White House was making basically going to make it very difficult for international students to maintain their visa during this continuing pandemic, because schools, you know, were basically mostly online because of safety reasons. And for international students to maintain their visa, they need to have some sort of face-to-face component in their classes. And so, you know, this, thankfully, they backed off of that, but there were weeks, maybe even a month there where, you know, our international students didn't know what was going to happen. And I mean, in a time where we're also, there's so much uncertainty already, to add that layer was really, really challenging. And so Molly Sherman and I stepped up as co-graduate advisors this summer, and that was something that, you know, we really prioritized in terms of educating ourselves and advocating for our students. Our university, Texas State, was really great in stepping up in terms of advocating for international students as well. And, you know, it's something that we hope that we can continue to make a priority and do our best to help facilitate some certainty, some, you know, transparency in terms of information, and then continue to advocate, you know, at an administrative level for them.
All right. So we're getting near the end of our panel, but we have a good question here that I think would be great to close with. So the question is, how do you remain true to your authentic self and not code switch when you feel like no matter what you say, you will make those around you uncomfortable and get your point across without being the, you know, the oppressed colored person, the oppressed angry Black guy, the oppressed woman, and so forth, etc.
I could share my my experience. I think mine would probably be different from everybody else's in terms of working independently. Unfortunately, it wasn't something that I could stop doing until I could build a level of trust with either clients or newer clients. So I have not been able to figure out a way to not technically code switch, because once I either like start talking, especially in person, and then, you know, you hear the accent, sometimes the conversation will go to a whole different place, which sometimes it could either build my trust more with the with the client, or it can kind of hurt me. But now that we are where we are with our business, Spark Nerds, I don't think we've had to really necessarily think about it much. I remember the last time I really had to put a lot of thought into it was before I wanted a nose piercing, and I was very concerned about how that would affect the people that I work with. And so far, and I would say also surprisingly, I didn't get the kind of reaction that I was thinking I was going to get, but I could credit that to just still keeping the same level of professionalism. Just because you have a nose piercing or ear piercing or tattoo does not necessarily mean that that you cannot conduct business or transaction responsibly.
Anybody else want to add in? How do you stay authentic to your true self and not code switch within the workplace?
I can jump in. The way I've started to approach things, and this has been like recently as I gotten, I guess, older and just understanding my surroundings, it's like if someone has a problem with the way that I am, that's a them problem, that's not a me problem. So, there are ways to like keep, be civil to each other and be respectful. Like, if you are a disrespectful person in general, like, is that your nature, then, I'm not telling that you have to code switch, but certain environments may not allow that. But if you're a specific race or nationality or, ethnicity or gender identity or whatever, just show up as yourself. And if they don't like it, that's not your problem. And I feel like as people of colors and marginalized communities, we are trained at an early age to kind of like no way like go back in the closet or like tone ourselves down, and that translates into everything. Like I remember when I was younger and I was working at one of my first jobs, like I would be almost ashamed of bringing food from home because they were like, oh, what does that smell, or what does that look like, or this and that. And then like you start like bringing salads or like burgers, or don't even bring food from home. So, and I think once you let go of like what people may think of me, um, I think it helps so much with like showing up as an authentic self, and it will translate to your relationships, to your work, to your mental health. But yeah, my main suggestion would be like, unless they are your manager, and even then, like, if they don't like you because you're gay, because you are Hispanic, because you're Asian, that's their problem. That's not your problem.
I want to add really quickly to be quite frank, code switching will never be completely eradicated. People will feel the need to do it, even at a minimal level. I think understanding that code switching can be seen as a superpower too, and so not doing it to survive, but also celebrating when you get to code switch back into who you are. And so the face or the front that I put on at work is the professional side of me, and I'm multifaceted. So when I hang out with my Black friends, I act differently. When I hang out with my Hispanic friends, I act differently. And it's not to say that I two-faced or changing or whatever. It's just that you are allowing yourself to show different sides of you. I would recommend reading The Costs of Code Switching. It's available on the Harvard Business Review. And it was written by Courtney L. McClune, who is an assistant professor at Cornell. They dive deep into what code switching is and just the research that they've done. And it explains just how minimal code switching can be and like to extreme versions. So it's a really great read.
Can I just tell like a story? Like it doesn't really answer the question, but so I was born here, but my parents are from Korea, and so I sometimes go back to Seoul, to South Korea, and I was there the summer before last, and Seoul is like a rapidly changing, like it's always changing, like the slang is always changing, like everything's just constantly changing. And it's interesting that like I've actually, even though I have a Korean name and I speak Korean, I find that I get treated better when I introduce myself as Alice and I speak English. And it's so like, it's also kind of interesting to get like, I guess like a different, a different cultural, like country, nation, experience in terms of code switching as well. And very, kind of concretely with language too, and what sort of like what that signifies, I guess, in terms of that culture.
Thank you for that. I'd just like to say thank you to all our panelists who attended today and shared their stories, their views, and everything. And just for everybody to walk away, remember to support your diversity talks. You know, these events are rare. They're not always hosted in such big platforms, and we're always fighting to have those discussions, especially like today with code switching. We don't get to have these discussions where it's like we have to be aware of, you know, others' fragility and making them uncomfortable. But right before we have to log out, Danielle is going to hop in a few, but to our panelists, do you guys have any last words that you want to share with the audience?
I would say just be yourself. Yeah, and the rest will work out, and it's probably easier said than done, but just be yourself, because you're going to be much happier, less stress, and I think like show up as yourself, and if they don't like it, then fuck it.
Also, amplify marginalized voices. Always, always, always. Doesn't matter race, gender, anything. Just amplify them.
Yeah, that's being yourself is the easiest way out of it, you know, because like Vic have said the whole talk, if you can't be yourself, then what are you really doing there? You will be miserable there. So just try your best to be close to yourself as possible, and if it's just not working out in that place, you're more than welcome to go somewhere else that would happily take you.
And don't feel alone. You know, I think it's really easy to feel alone, and yeah, you know, talk to other people, share your stories when you feel safe to. And yeah, I think connecting helps a lot, and can feel really empowering, and give you maybe some courage that you may not feel at that time.
Thank you for your words, everybody. Thank you for attending. I hope everybody enjoyed the event. Danielle, you can go ahead and close it off. I think we had a great discussion today, and hopefully we'll have more in the future. Keep supporting your diversity talks, because that's the only way we can keep on going.
Awesome. A huge thank you to Yaslin and Personas Collective and all of our panelists. And thank you to all of you for being here and contributing to the chat. It was a really great conversation. And so our volunteers dropped in a survey we'd love for you to take. And we also look forward to seeing you tomorrow for day 5 of Austin Design Week. Have a good night, everyone.